original intention was to build a government of national unity which brought everybody together. Paul doesn't have that history. He hasn't read enough. And I would advise Paul to educate himself. To be abreast with all of these different, strands and so on, and stop talking like an ignorant, I want to be very careful with my words. I want to be very careful with my words. Complete ignorance. And he displays this ignorance with confidence, bravado.
Adom, Kwasi Pratt are clashing with Paul Adom, all concerning Kotoka International Airport name change omo de bano. Say yet na say na ye analysis enkomo bebre na akoso omo say General Kotoka ye coup na adio ye ni nya de power si engineer so ema nidin enda Kotoka Airport so. Now on this submission Paul Adom on Joy News File ekoko kansem echichim say Sentia General Kotoka etu Kwame Nkrumah dina ne say na Kwame Nkrumah ye nipa bonefo. That was the narration of Paul Adom edibetu ja Otchere Paul Kwame Nkrumah ne say su nipa boni ni de bi mbada inti na General Kotoka etu ni fi ho eba bet na akonwa no so eni na sa coup no eba ye na sa nkomo we san Paul Adom edi nkomo ni na no na Fifi Pratt 8 ye no na Otchere Fifi Pratt say and someone Paul Adom kai na ye different and yes sa na tie na wotie nkomo no senia Paul Adom be di no any nsem a Fifi Pratt ka utumu say two different thing for time sake inti me pese me kasapi yenti nsem Paul Adom edi tuja Joy News File so and na praise General Kotoka say General Kotoka ya de because na Kwame Nkrumah the sesu nipa boni ni de na ebi mbada ye ba ebeti nsem a Kwasi Pratt ono so odi abetuja.
If you look at it critically, it's becoming very obvious that what all this is about is about settling political scores. It has nothing to do with renaming an airport.
Really?
It has everything to do with settling a major political part of our history, which is the sanctity and the 100% goodness of our first president and the illustrious Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. The point of the history is that since Nkrumah died, he has become much bigger than when he was alive. In the year 2000, the British Broadcasting Corporation, which did the survey, and in that survey, many of us as university students voted for Kwame Nkrumah because he was competing with Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela was South African. And we didn't understand how the African story of the century can be told without the emasculation of colonialism and imperialism. And you can't attribute that to Mandela. The removal of colonialism, imperialism, and the fight against neocolonialism is certainly Nkrumah's fight. So we felt that it is actually unfair to compare Nelson Mandela to Kwame Nkrumah. We even thought that John Mensah Saba had done more than Nelson Mandela for Africa, but that's beside the point. So Nkrumah then ends up by the year 2001, 2002 as this ultimate political hero who has no blemish. Now, since 2017, at the outset of Akufo-Addo's government, he began to demonstrate a certain penchant for the history of Ghana. In his maiden independence speech, and this was the first time it happened on Independence Day, he almost gave a history lecture to the audience at the Independence Square, to the point where it was becoming very long. There has been some concerns then at that time about that, and I got personally involved because I attended a forum at the Socialist Forum to discuss these things on the celebration of 24th February, which is always the big day. 24th February is the day Nkrumah was overthrown. So this year, the overthrow of Nkrumah is going to be 60 years long. And it had always been planned by some of these actors that on the 60th anniversary of Nkrumah, let us restore Nkrumah's image 100% over Ghana. This Kotoka's name on an important edifice like the airport is the remaining last leg of the nemesis of Nkrumah that must be taken away, because they have been able to establish Nkrumah as the hero and the 100% hero since the BBC issue. Now, what we have been pointing out is that they started by arguing that Kotoka is a coup maker. Okay. And then that argument appears to be shifting. If you listen to Ambassador Kwasi Pratt, he was concerned that Mahama Yarega is turning this whole thing into a tribal matter. that what is Zakra and what is all that. It's not about a tribal matter. It is about removing the image of some coup maker, as they say. Okay, you just talked about Arthur Kennedy, who then mentioned the coup maker thing relating to Rawlings. And then we also know about Franklin Kujo, who put up how Nkrumah's regime was murderous. What we would like Ghanaians to see, and at the end of the day, the government will make its decision. And then we will have to decide whether it's a political decision that we vote on the next time or whatever we do. But we have to, we cannot ignore history. We have to make obeisance to history. The history is that from 1960 up to the time Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966, he was a despot. He was not good for Ghana. He was terrible for Ghana. The 1960 constitution which Nkrumah put together, which I have in front of me, has Nkrumah's name buried in the Constitution, Article 10. Correct. Where it is talking about Kwame Nkrumah as President of Ghana. So it's talking about Kwame Nkrumah as President of Ghana in that Article 10. There is also a bit more. It is in this same 1960 Constitution that Nkrumah decided that there was an amendment to the 1960 Constitution in 1964. And if you look at the amendments, it will interest you to know that the amendments that was provided in the 1964 amendment included the fact that Kwame Nkrumah was now able to dismiss judges. Yes. And also, yes, he was able to dismiss judges. And also, the national flag of Ghana was changed. He also banned all political parties in 1964. And people were imprisoned. Preventive Detention Act was created in 1958. You might not think of it as a bad law. It is only the usage that you can criticize. Because what happened is that Nkrumah had been attacked by a bomb. And it was becoming very scary between Nkrumah and the opposition. The violence was growing on the part of the opposition, I must say. And Nkrumah needed something that will allow the intelligence agencies to work. So that's why PDA was set up. So in fact, if you look at the usage of PDA, between 1958 when it was set up and about 1961, it was minimal. But from 1961 to 1964, the PDA was railroading everywhere and every home was afraid. This was the state of affairs in Ghana. Now, because we are not accustomed to our history that much, and all of us, many of us talking today, were not born in that time. We all don't know that, and we are railroaded into Nkrumah as something.
That's a situation where you could be arrested and put in custody without the intervention of a court.
Not just without the intervention of the courts, but on the basis that the Minister for Interior is thinking in his mind that you are preparing to do something wrong. This is a fundamental departure from the processes of the jurisprudence of the criminal court.
He doesn't have that history. He hasn't read enough. And I would advise Paul to educate himself. To be abreast with all of these different, strands and so on, and stop talking like an ignorant. I want to be very careful with my words. I want to be very careful with my words. Complete ignorance. And he displays this ignorance with confidence, bravado, and so on. What else did he say? What else did he say? The coup. Who organized the coup? It is not true that the 1966 coup was organized by Kotoka. That's another falsehood. Now, Moro, listen to me very carefully. And I said that last week on this very platform. I had the privilege of interviewing one of the architects or one of the people who we know was involved in the 1966 coup. And I interviewed JWK Halley. No, AK Deku. I interviewed AK Deku. I told the story last week. And if you listen to AK Deku, the hub of the conspiracy to overthrow Nkrumah in 1966, the Ghanaian hub, was led by a Major Kwasi, who was a military officer working at the 37 military hospital. In fact, it was in his house that the conspirators met. Halley, Deku, and many others were recruited to join the conspiracy. Okay? Indeed, that coup was organized. First of all, it was instigated, sponsored, and organized by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. And the evidence is there. It's in black and white. Just read it. Look, the Socialist Movement of Ghana has published a book titled The Great Deception: How the CIA Overthrew Nkrumah. That book has two components. One is the raw declassified documents of the CIA about how it organized the coup. This is the CIA itself talking about how it organized the coup. And then there is commentary by persons who know, like Mahoney and others. And so, if you read that book, you are left in no doubt about who organized the coup and why the coup was organized. In fact, the coup was not organized because Nkrumah had become a dictator and a tyrant and so on. It's false. You see, on September 21, 1960, I think, the British High Commissioner in Ghana then, he was called A.W. Snelling. A.W. Snelling sent a cable to his home office, urging his home office to speed up preparations for the coup d'etat, and he wrote in black and white that it was time to get rid of Nkrumah, and that if they didn't get rid of Nkrumah, British interest in Africa would suffer. That was the only reason for the coup. Foreign intelligence agencies conspiring to overthrow a Ghanaian government because that Ghanaian government was committed to the protection of the national interest, because that Ghanaian government was loyal to the resolution of the 1945 Congress, Pan-African Congress in Manchester, which has called on Africa to struggle for national independence, to control its own resources and exploit its own resources for the benefit of its people, and to build continental union, a continental union guided by the principles of scientific socialism. This is what the West was afraid of. This is what the West didn't want. This is why they staged the 1966 coup, and they themselves have commented on it. Beyond this, Paul should find time to read John Stockwell. John Stockwell. John Stockwell was one of key CIA agents who eventually rebelled and has written his account of why and how Nkrumah was overthrown. Then there's Philip Agee. Stockwell, of course, died in exile and so on, but there's also Philip Agee, whose accounts are clear about how the coup was organized, who organized it, and so on. But beyond that, it's also the book. It's called, the title of the book is JFK.
In that of course, Otchere nkomo say near who do you side with? Woni Paul Adom Otchere ya adwen ana say woni eye Kwasi Pratt and eye adwen. Mami hu adwen cho comment no mu. It's all concerning the Kotoka International Airport. Edin almost omo person omo nsesa no and the ababe dani nsensem pi on the internet. A man for strongest conviction in Nane say eye General Kotoka no ye coup. No bi a wa ye coup de ehu hia say ne din Ebeda Kotoka International Airport no so. Out of what would saying? Aha, gossips today. Mami hu adwen cho comment.